Hi, another film I watched this week while catching up on the main Oscar contenders was The Secret Agent, a Brazilian story set in 1977 in the midst of the country's military dictatorship. It's the story of our main character, who initially we know very little about. He's traveling cross country to a new city in the far east of the country and is there to take up a new job working at the local Bureau of Records. He settles into a boarding house with a very kind, very elderly woman who introduces him to the various other people living there, and everyone seems a bit guarded. And it gradually emerges that he's actually living under an assumed name. That as a result of the dictatorship and the brutal regime, his wife is dead, although he says to his young son, who lives with his maternal grandparents, that she actually died of pneumonia, but it's strongly implied that she was in fact murdered. He is trying to track down his uh, the circumstances of his mother's death using the Bureau of Records access as a cover, whilst also being involved with a loose resistance network, which includes his in-laws, his neighbours, and various other characters, whilst completely separately, the man who was responsible for singling him and his family out in the first place retains the services of two hitmen to track him down and have him killed. Um, the movie runs almost 3 hours, and I was never bored. I was never not engaged with what I was seeing. It's a fascinating movie because it shows something I think completely fresh and different to me at least, and I imagine to a lot of similar audiences. Seeing what life was like in Brazil during the military dictatorship, I think, is really fascinating because, on the one hand, you have the violence and the brutality and the absolute control that the authorities have, but on the same hand, or on the other hand, a chunk of the film, a large chunk of the film, particularly early on, is set around Carnival time, ironically being released in the week of Mardi Gras. And so you have people having parties and celebrating. And when we first meet the local police chief, he's sort of got glitter on his face and sort of bits of sparkly stuff on. I was thinking, where's he been? What's going on? And he mentions that he's just been dragged out of a carnival party to investigate something. Oh, right. So there's still other things going on. It's just because it's a dictatorship doesn't mean that everyone is grim all the time. It's not like Airstrip 1 in 1984. There are still parties. There's still entertainment. A large chunk of the film is based around local cinema because the main character's father-in-law is a projectionist, and this is used as a base for other characters. And we see at one point, people going to see The Omen, um, and there's sexual acts taking place, and the main character says, "Does that happen often?" And so, although we are following this main story of the main character and the conflicts and how all that evolves and develops, we're seeing a portrait of the country as a whole, of how this entire continuum operates, of being dropped into this environment of another country in another decade, another century, in fact, and seeing what it's like there. And it's a completely absorbing, completely convincing experience of just walking around in this semi alien world. I was completely absorbed by it for its entire running time, and I thought it was a totally fascinating, totally original film. The director, whose name I will definitely get wrong, the writer director, I thought did an absolutely superb job with the film. It's a brilliant, absorbing evocation of this world, of this feeling of paranoia, whilst parties and movies are going on. It feels it feels like it's happening now because the mix of saturated colours and handheld photography and very natural dialogue, it all feels very fly on the wall, very um, cinema verite. But the story is engaging, but the characters are fascinating. It's This year the Oscars have launched a new category for best casting, and it's for a lot of people. I can imagine this is very hard to quantify. But you watch a film like this and you understand what that means because all the supporting characters look like real people. They look like they've just been pulled out of this world, that they are totally believable as being just functionaries in an office or guys who live on the street. Everything feels totally real, and finding people like that is the job of a casting director, and that's why it's so hard. And the casting in this film is amazing. Um, the way the story develops is also, I think, very creative because we occasionally get scenes that jump forward to the present day of university students in present day post Bolsonaro Brazil, studying documents and recordings left behind by these various people and trying to piece together what happened. So we're almost seeing it from their point of view. And there are interesting elements where parts of the story are left out so that other people can fill them in a different time frame. It's also often very funny. The opening sequence is set at a petrol station where the main character is driving cross country. And as he pulls into the forecourt in the station in the middle of nowhere, there's a dead body laying there with cardboard laid over it. And the manager, who's the only member of staff there, explains that he tried to rob the store a few days earlier, that his assistant retaliated and shot him. They called the police, but they still haven't turned up. So he occasionally has to frighten away the wild dogs that try and eat the dead body. Later on, the police are called to investigate another body that's been fished out of the sea, and they arrive in the lab where the body is, and the body in fact turns out to be that of a gigantic shark, which some oceanographers had been studying, had cut open and found inside a severed human leg. This this leg goes on to become a major character by apparently coming back to life and running around or hopping around a nearby park and kicking people, and according to a later news story, stealing another leg from a lab somewhere with the suggestion that it's trying to piece together a new body. And this is a completely bizarre, surreal story element. It's suggested that it's something that's been planted in the press as propaganda, as distraction. But we do see a scene from the leg's point of view, which suggests maybe this is really happening. Maybe this bizarre, fantastical event is occurring alongside these much more realistic, dark stories. It's one of the better films I've seen this year. It's certainly one of the best Oscar nominated films. As I say, it's completely absorbing, completely enveloping in feeling what it was like to live in urban Brazil in the late 70s. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, absolutely thrilling. You will feel the time fly by. Very highly recommended.